Next item up is item number 12 on the agenda. This is progress report on the progress of drawing district boundaries as a part of instituting district-based elections for city council seats as of November 2022 regular election. With that, could I have staff report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to give a little bit of background introduction, then I'm going to turn the reins over to some of our consultant team from Redistricting Partners. Kimi Shigatani is here tonight, and also here is Sophia Garcia. I'm looking around the screen to see if Sophia is still here with us. I think she's here. Oh, there you are, Sophia. Thank you for waving, get my attention. I was looking for your name. All right, so our team from Redistricting Partners in here, and they're going to give a little presentation. So by way of background, we got here, the council has adopted, taken a couple of important actions towards district elections. It adopted a resolution committing to move towards district elections, and it created a city council ad hoc committee. Council members Alarcon and Lee sit on that committee, and it is, oh, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Clark and Councilmember Alarcon on that committee, and they've been working with our consultant at Redistricting Partners and staff to kind of look at the schedules and move this matter forward, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But this was an outcome of a notice of violation being filed under the California Voting Rights Act, as the council will recall. In California, most cities, in fact, maybe even most cities still today, have what's called at-large election, a system where council members are elected at large by voting by all qualified voters, and they can reside anywhere within the jurisdiction. Under the California Voting Rights Act, it heavily favors agencies, public agencies moving towards district elections in order to be sure they're more equitable to communities of interest in all communities. And the council has agreed to move in that direction without acknowledging that there was a violation of the California Voting Rights Act. So we're on that path now. There's some choices to be made, and I'll talk about those in a second, between 4 districts and 1 at-large mayor, or 5 districts. But the committee's work has included a schedule. I'll share that here, kind of walk through that, and a tentative schedule. It's that schedule is affected by census information being available, and that's been delayed, so our schedule's been pushed a little bit, but we're planning on getting going in earnest here in July. And so a part of the purpose of this meeting is to serve as kind of a launching point for public education and outreach, and the presentation that Sophia will be making here in a minute is the first step in that, kind of a District Mapping 101 presentation to let people know, here's how this process is going to work, and we need your help, and inviting them to do that. So there's several meetings that will go on inviting the public to present their ideas about communities of interest in mapping, the council to consider that information, and then at the end of here, the important part, by February of 2022, we could have a final map of districts for the council's consideration that could be acted upon in February, or if they make changes, in March. And that's all in preparation for implementing district elections for the first 3 council seats at the election this coming November. So this schedule is tight, but it gives enough time between February and March adoption for candidates within the newly created districts to understand that they have an opportunity to run for council within the district election process, and take out papers by the deadline for pulling papers, which is about mid-July for the 2022. So we're comfortable that this gives enough time in that process for that to happen. So that's kind of our processing timeline. Your council, when it created the ad hoc committee, asked the committee to bring back a report on this kind of information, the process, and to work with a consultant and with staff in order to do that. And so tonight's meeting is kind of the first big step in their report back to the council to present this information from redistricting partners on the process. And then on July 26th, we plan on the committee bringing back another report that will include recommendations on the number of districts. So I mentioned that the council, under the settlement agreement and under the California Voting Rights Act, has a choice of 4 or 5 districts, 4 districts and 1 at-large, the mayor's seat, or 5 districts. And so before we ask for the public's help in determining what those districts look like, we need to determine if it's going to be 4 or 5. So a recommendation will come forward to your council on that. Determining which 3 districts will be subject to election first. The council has an opportunity to determine that after the districts are created. And so a process will be recommended by the committee. And so we'll be working with the committee to look at examples of these processes that other cities have used, how they've gone about doing it, and then make a recommendation to your council on how will the council decide if there's 4 districts or 5 districts. The first election this November, November 2022, I should say, where there are 3 seats up for election, which 3 seats, which 3 districts will be up for election for those 3 seats. And then finally, there's various district mapping tools that are available. Maybe Sophia will talk about this a little this evening. We can use some of those or all of those tools that are available. And so the committee will be making a recommendation about which mapping tools to facilitate this process that the community members can use to submit their ideas about boundaries for districts to the council for its consideration. So this can happen at in-person meetings. It can happen via software tools. So there's lots of different ways to do that. And we hope that the committee will be making a recommendation on those 3 areas to your council on July 26th. So that's my introduction to the process. And unless there's questions on that background, I'll turn it over to Sophia to do the presentation.
Thank you. Roy?
Dave, is this specific only to district elections, or can the discussion of, say, term limits be also included in the committee's discussion?
We're moving forward, and the committee is moving forward based on the settlement agreement and the direction provided in the council resolution. That does not include anything about term limits. If the council wants to take that up as a separate matter, it can do that. But I just would be concerned about that and getting in the way of compliance with the commitment we've made for getting district elections established by November 2022.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thanks. We'll move forward then. Dave?
All right, Sophia.
Can you guys see my screen and the presentation?
Yes, we're good. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Dave, for that introduction. My name is Sophia Garcia. I'm the GIS and Outreach Director with Redistricting Partners, and we'll be going over your Redistricting 101. It's titled CVRA and Districting the City of Carpinteria. So just an overview about what we'll be talking about today. This presentation will cover a range of different topics to facilitate public engagement and education on redistricting and to help facilitate a fair and transparent districting process. We'll go over the California Voting Rights Act, some distinctions between districting, redistricting, and gerrymandering, the traditional redistricting principles, and we have some information on population and composition of the city through the American Community Survey, and then a couple of maps with some estimated population data that we have. So as Dave mentioned, you all are going through a California Voting Rights Act districting process, and the California Voting Rights Act is a state law that prohibits the use of at-large election systems in local government if there is racially polarized voting. And the big two things to kind of think about when we're talking about the CVRA is at large and racially polarized voting. And at large, as Dave just talked about, is defined as anything other than a system in which an elected official lives in a district and is only elected by members of that district. And racially polarized voting is determined through an analysis which quantifies the amount of voting which can be shown to be correlated to race. So these are two big definitions when we're talking about the CVRA. It also takes the principles of the Federal Voting Rights Act and expands on it regarding districted elections in two key ways. While the federal law uses majority-minority districts as a standard for vulnerability, the CVRA only requires ability to influence. And this ability to influence has allowed for plaintiffs to come forward under the CVRA and have cities go through this districting process. The CVRA requires that plaintiffs get full reimbursement for legal fees associated with any successful challenge. However, these legal fees can be lessened or eliminated if the district follows a strict and prompt process, which we are going through right now. Districting is the initial process of creating election district boundaries. These specific boundaries determine who is eligible to run for office. Those folks must live within the boundaries to qualify for election, and also who votes in the election. Only voters within the district vote for their council member. Districting does not determine how the city decides to govern. So the city can still work to achieve goals that benefit the city as a whole rather than the interest of a single district. So when we go through the districting process, if the city council wants to represent the entire city, they can still do that. They also do not determine how services or relationships between the city and the public are managed. So it's an important distinction to know that districting does not determine these specific factors. So now we'll go, what is redistricting? So again, we're going through an initial districting process, and in 2030, the city will go through a redistricting process, which is the adjustment of district lines every 10 years after the release of the US Census. The best known examples are Congress and the legislature. And we go through this districting process every 10 years after we get that new census data. As we know, the census data has been released late. We're going to get that hopefully at the beginning of September. But we do know now that this districting process has become extremely politicized and has been subject to a number of high-profile Supreme Court decisions than any other part of the elected system, which has caused a lot of people to correlate districting, redistricting with a gerrymander. When I tell folks that I work for a redistricting firm, I always get the question right out of the gate, oh, so you guys gerrymander? And that's sort of the term that has become synonymous with this process. And the term gerrymander came from a cartoon depiction of a serpent looking like the district for Governor Elbridge Gerry in Massachusetts over 100 years ago. However, there has been more recent examples of gerrymandering that look really similar to that serpent image. And this is an actual Senate District 22 from 2001. And this is one of the districts that helped create the California Redistricting Commission. So this specific district in the process that we used to go through helped create the Citizen Commission. So this is just a simple thought experiment. So when we sort of think about gerrymandering, and we use these triangles, the yellow and green. So when you initially think, like, how do we create 3 districts with these triangles, you can go all horizontal. However, if you wanted to create districts that would favor the green triangles, then we can create them in this way, where we pack all of the yellow triangles in one, split their vote, and now have the green triangles with 2 majority districts. Some other types of gerrymandering are partisan, racial, and incumbent gerrymandering. The two ones that have been primary focus of the media are partisan gerrymandering, which the current Supreme Court has determined to be non-justiciable, but some state and local laws have stepped in to ban this. In California, under the Fair Maps Act, partisan gerrymandering is not allowed. Racial gerrymandering, the courts have repeatedly found this to be unlawful, and racial gerrymandering is not allowed under the Federal Voting Rights Act. And incumbent gerrymandering, which is common in a lot of redistricting conducted by the agency itself, and incumbent gerrymandering is not allowed under the Fair Maps Act. So we have had a number of state laws that have occurred between the last redistricting cycle and this one, which are in place to help to not create a gerrymander during the redistricting process. Some of the things that we also have to help prevent a district from becoming a gerrymander are these traditional redistricting principles. And there are a number of criteria that have been upheld nationally and in the courts. And the first one is relatively equal size. So this is the big piece, why districting and redistricting comes after the census, because we get new data, we see where people have moved, we see if folks have, students have moved, and where the population shifts has occurred. And when we're talking about equal size, we are discussing people, not citizens. So that's an important distinction. Contiguous. So this really just means that a district must be whole, must be intact. The only way that a district could not be contiguous is if there was a literal island in your jurisdiction. So to my knowledge, you don't have any islands attached to the city of Carpinteria. An example of an island could be Catalina Island, and then it would be attached to Long Beach or LA, and then another term called functional contiguity would come into play, but contiguous is just making sure the districts are intact. Maintaining communities of interest is a big piece in this redistricting cycle, and under the Fair Maps Act is a stronger criteria that the city of Carpinteria must follow. And communities of interest is an idea that brings like-minded people together for representation. A community of interest can include ethnic and language minorities and other groups. When we think about communities of interest, it is a term that is really specific for redistricting, but we want folks in the public to know that we understand that you all are experts in your community. You are knowledgeable of the services that you use from the city, the types of people that you're around. So when you think of communities of interest, you can just have it be synonymous with communities that you are a part of. Some of these examples could include the LGBTQ+ community, people living within a specific industry. So it could be farming, fishing, manufacturing, senior citizens or students, downtown or urban, rural or agriculture, or homeowners or renters. Another important distinction to know about communities of interest is that you do not need census data to define your communities of interest. I know a number of these bullet points, we can find some data through the census, but you do not need any census data to draw your community, to testify to the city, or to submit a form. Some other examples of communities of interest could include ethnic and language minorities. These communities are covered under the Voting Rights Act, such as Latinos, Asians, or African Americans. And while race can be a community of interest, it cannot be a predominant factor in drawing districts. It can be something that you sort of think about or correlate to your community, but it cannot be the predominant factor in drawing districts for the city. So some things to think about when you are getting ready to prepare your testimony, or to submit your form, or to use that online tool, is to think about what is your community shared culture or characteristic. And then, because we're talking about mapping, what is your community's geography? Are you dense in nature? Do you have an ability to be mapped? So again, while I said you don't need any census data, can you draw out your community on a paper map or on the online form? And then third, think about what is your community's relationship to the city of Carpinteria. So what are the things that tie you, and what kind of legislative sort of interest you have with keeping your community together? So an example could be if you have a dog, you're a dog owner, some important things, I'm a dog owner myself, are safe sidewalks, are lots of trees, proximity to a dog park that has a water fountain. And so my community could be dog owners or folks who go to a specific dog park, and then the ability to be mapped could be the route to the park or the streets around my house. And then the relationship I have to the agency would be if I don't think there's enough adequate recreational opportunities for me and my dog, then that could be something that I could talk to city officials about. Another redistricting principle is following city, county, or local government lines. So some examples could be neighborhoods. So a criteria under the Fair Maps Act is, to the extent practicable, the geographic integrity of any local neighborhood or local community of interest shall be respected in a manner that minimizes its division. So if the city of Carpinteria has specific neighborhoods, folks can testify, and under the Fair Maps Act, the city must follow this. And the last one is keeping districts compact, and this is in appearance or in function. And California has a rather elegant or simple definition to think about when you're thinking about compactness, and it is to not bypass nearby populated areas in favor of more distant populated areas. So we have some examples to help you help that like sink in, and for you to kind of understand that. The first example on the left is, we see that in the sort of top left corner of that image for that specific city, you can see there's very narrow slices between each district. And the teal blue, you can see that it's a very few distinction between the pink and the orange, but it shoots across the city. So this blue area bypasses all of this population to collect the population at the top. So this does not stand under the new law. These maps were created before the Fair Maps Act new definition. This other example is another city on the right, and this we're going to look at the red district, and we can vaguely see like a park in this area, but the red district bypasses portions of the blue, goes over a highway, and then goes all the way to the top left of the city. And so this red area also bypasses nearby population in favor of more distant populations. And so this is no longer allowable under the new law. Additional traditional redistricting principles under the Fair Maps Act are the prisoner population at their residence prior to incarceration. So our California state database will receive the census file, and then they will take all of the prison population and then reallocate them across the state. So if there were folks in prison up north in California, but they were residents of the city of Carpinteria, then that population would come into your city. Another portion of communities of interest is, we define communities of interest as not including relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. It also prohibits districts from being drawn for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against a political party. And the Fair Maps Act also prohibits mid-decade redistricting. Additional requirements under the new law require cities and counties to conduct outreach and reach out to community-based organizations. So this presentation and all the other redistricting specific presentations will be on the City of Carpinteria Redistricting website, where folks will be able to access that, access all recordings. They must hold a minimum of set hearings to encourage public engagement. And then, yeah, all posting redistricting commission information on the website must be maintained for 10 years. So in 2030, when this process occurs again, then the city council or whoever is conducting that redistricting can then look back at all of the information and everything that was done in this 2021 process. So we do have some estimated population according to the American Community Survey. So while we said that the total population numbers from the census won't be coming out until September, the census releases a number of different files. And one of the ones that they do is the ACS, which they released in February. And the estimated population for that is 13,376. We cannot use estimated population for the districting process. That's not allowed, but we can use it for planning purposes. And using this estimated population, we determine an estimated target size of a council district that would be ideal. That is 2,675. And under the equal population criteria, the total district population deviation cannot exceed 10%. So that's part of the kind of equal population. CVAP, we have some CVAP numbers of the Asian, Latino, Black and White, and then a total CVAP, and that stands for citizen voting age population. And then we're able just to map a couple of these. So this is the city boundaries and street boundaries. We have the Latino CVAP, and you'll notice that this number right here, 17, is outside of your city limits. So this particular census block group is a whole block group. So this 17% does include the shaded area outside of your city. And you'll notice that at other points on the map as well. So you do have a 42 and 43% Latino CVAP on the northwest portion of your city. And then we have numbers for your Asian CVAP as well. Dave, I did, in this presentation, I guess we are not covering Maptitude and District R, but I'm happy to talk about those two different online mapping tools. I know Kimmy's on the call as well, and so we can discuss that with your city council, but we realize it's not a part of the presentation right now. So we apologize for that, but we can definitely discuss that when the presentation is done. We also have, oh, go ahead.
I was just saying that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So what's next is there will be public hearings that will be held. There's a number of ways that the public can submit any testimony. The city has this community of interest form. I think it's available online. It could be available in paper form. We're also working with the city to create placemats that folks can have if they would like to have another touch point to drawing a map for a community of interest. And then the timeline that we have right now is that this is the first public hearing. The second one will be in September. Gonna wait for that census release information. And then the next map hearings will be in October, January, and then final adoption will happen in February. So I can stop sharing, again, Kimmy's on the call, but we can talk more about the differences between District R and Maptitude Online, which are the two mapping platforms that other folks have been using.
Yeah, I don't know if we, Sophia and Kimmy, I don't know if we need to get into the details between the different software platforms, but just the one that you guys favor, and just maybe describing it in general and how the community members would access it, and then some of the other non-web-based tools that are available.
Great. So as Dave mentioned, or I mentioned, there's two sort of software mapping platforms that we're seeing a lot of folks use at the moment for ease, for the usability of the online form. We do prefer Districtor or District R. I believe it's pronounced Districtor. And it's a platform that we would work with your city to have a specific link for the city of Carpinteria. And then the public will be able to draw their communities of interest by either placing a point or drawing their geography. And then when the 2020 census data is released, then folks can draw district plans. We do have a number of recordings of using Districtor and Maptitude, and would be happy to send to you all so that you can see a visual. And then we also have a slide deck of showing it using a presentation. That Kimmy can jump in if she'd like that.
Sure. So the other primary difference between Maptitude and Districtor, I think, is Maptitude is a little more robust in the data sets that show up, I guess, as layers on the maps. The downside is that it is a bit of a heavier lift for IT departments, for folks to get going. It requires an external server or a separate server. And it also requires a lot of access that generally we're finding cities and counties whose servers tend to be secured have a difficult time sort of working with. So Districtor is just a simple web-based link, and so it just sits on your website and doesn't require any hosting because it's hosted through Tufts University.
All right, well, thank you, Kimmy and Sophia. Maybe in addition to the software-based, the web-based platform, there are some handwritten tools, if you will, that will be available.
Absolutely. So there's a community of interest form that Sophia had mentioned, and that's really just a way for folks to sort of write out long form where their communities of interest are and what kind of relationships they have with the city around those communities. So typically we see things like school district boundaries. I'm sorry, my dog was having an issue. So typically we see folks who are very connected to school district boundaries or neighborhood boundaries, things like that. And so those are generally the communities of interest we see. It's also very helpful if there are communities. We work with several cities who have seat communities who may not necessarily identify as a community of interest or get involved in these processes, but we think that those types of communities are also really important for the city to recognize when drawing lines. In addition to that, Sophia had also mentioned placemats, and effectively what they are they'd be maps of the city with census tracts drawn out for population counts, and then we laminate them, and then folks are able to take dry erase markers and literally just sort of draw out their communities of interest or draw districts if that's at the point in the process where you are. And they can add up the census numbers to achieve sort of that equal population within each district. And it's really helpful if you're moving to meeting in person, I think, to have those sort of physical tools, because not everybody is going to want to or be interested in doing online mapping tools or even have access to computers all of the time. So we'll provide the placemats laminated, and also we'll send a PDF to the city to post on your website so that folks can just download it and print it and give it back to you, when they're ready to do that.
Great. Thank you again, Kimmy and Sophia. Appreciate the presentation. And again, council members, the purpose of this meeting in part tonight is to introduce these concepts to the public. We'll be bringing back a report again from your ad hoc city council committee on July 26th to make some decisions that are necessary in order to move forward with the mapping process. And then you saw the schedule. We'll start that work in earnest with redistricting partners. So we're available for questions.
Great. Thank you. Do we have any questions of staff?
Mayor?
Roy, go ahead, Roy.
Hey, what if the public or the community does not want districts in our city? Is there any course that they can take, or is this forced upon the city?
Members of the public can always express their opinion. The council has, again, through resolution and a settlement agreement, has determined to move forward. So a decision has been made to move forward with district elections. But that doesn't preclude members of the public from voicing their opinions. And they're welcome to do that at any meeting, either under general public comment or when a matter with regard to, like tonight, district elections is being considered by council.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I do, Mayor.
Go ahead, Greg.
This is Sophia or Dave. Say the districts are drawn up and folks run for council, have an election, and things go haywire with people arguing about the district lines and this and that. How tied up are we for the following year as far as those districts?
If I understand your question, Councilmember Cardy, is the maps are drawn, they're approved, they're adopted by the council, and then we start having elections, and there's residents are concerned about the way the lines were drawn. I'll turn it over to Sophia and Kimmy to talk about, is the next opportunity to redistrict and amend the map 10 years, the next census period, or are there provisions in state law to amend maps in between census?
That was my question, yes.
So under the new Fair Maps, the Fair Maps Act, it prevents mid-decade redistricting. Just to do it, there has to be like a violation under the Federal Voting Rights Act, or another violation for folks to want to go through that process. We can find the specific verbiage that it says in the law, and we can have that sent through Dave. But generally, the big piece of the Fair Maps Act 2 is to go through this in a transparent process, to have the public be as involved, to have as many touch points for the public to be involved. As Dave mentioned, I know that you guys are going through a districting process for the first time, so but we are doing the process now. The city has reached an agreement. We're here. We're going to go through the process. We're going to have some final maps to adopt in February, but just to district, it is prohibited under the Fair Maps Act.
Yeah, as much as I'd like this to go smooth, there's a lot of complicated pieces to it, and it's quite a bit to get right in 1 year. It's just a concern.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, seeing none, I will now open this up for public comment. So Brian, do we have anybody out there?
Mayor, there's no public comment.
Thank you. Aaron?
No public comment on this end, Mayor.
Thank you. I will now close public comment, bring it back to the council. Currently, the motion is a receive and file report. So that's what we're looking at. It's a non-action item. So any more informational, but if there's anybody who wishes to make any comments on this or take action on it.
Mayor, I'd just like to thank district partners for all that they're doing. We're in good hands. Pretty clear.
Agreed. Roy? Yeah, you're muted there, Roy.
Okay, I move to receive and file the report.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Okay. I think Greg got the edge on that one, so we'll give it to Greg. Okay. We'll leave it to staff to figure that one out then. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion?
And just that there is one correction on page 2 of the staff report, as it indicates Councilmember Lee as opposed to Vice Mayor Clark.
Okay.
Thank you. I made that mistake twice. Sorry about that, Vice Mayor Clark and Councilmember Lee.
Good catch. Thank you. Okay. Do we have anything else? Any other discussion? Seeing none. Brian, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Alarcon,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Clark, Councilmember Cardy,
Aye.
and Mayor Nomura.
Aye. Thank you. And thanks for the hard work, everybody.